Hey everyone, today we're going to do this fun and bright tribal tiger look using Crivolin's Luna Rainbow Cake. To start this design, I'm going to load up my half circle black Crivolin sponge with some Crivolin Creamy White, and I'm going to paint the top lip and all the way up to the bottom of the nose. And then I'm going to use the white and go from the inner corner of the eyes out to the sides of the forehead in an angle on both sides. Next, I'll give my sponge about 7 or 8 spritzes of water and load it across the rainbow cake. And then with the lightest color, which in this case is that bright yellow neon, I'm going to start and pat out. And when I get to the edges of the white, I'm only going to be using just the edge of my sponge in order to keep a nice straight line. At this point, it's totally okay if it's not perfect around the eyes or around the edges, because most of that is going to get covered up with line work. I decided I wanted this to be more of a fantasy tiger look, so I'm taking some of the blue back into my hairline. Next, using a small petal-shaped sponge, I'm going to load up the green, the teal, and the blue, and then use one of my boost stencils in an animal print in order to make a multicolored effect over the white area of the eyes. And for all of the line work in this design, I'm going to be using Crivolin Regular Black and a number 1 Low Cornell round brush. So I'm just going to pull down a sharp point from the inner corner of the eye and then swoop it up over the eyelid and out like a cat eye shape. And you'll notice from the outer corner, I've just pulled a U shape up, and then I'm pulling a curved line down around, and then I'll add a U shape at the end of the line. And then I'll do the same exact thing on the other side. So just pull down that sharp point from the inner corner and then swoop it up like a cat eye. Add a U to the tip of that cat eye. Pull down a curved line on the cheekbone and add a U shape at the end, and then fill it in. Next, I'll come in and line underneath the eye. If I were doing this design on a small child, I would not line under the eye. It's too uncomfortable for them. But for me, for an adult or an older child, it should be fine. So next, I'm just going to pull down a V shape and then fill in the inner edge a little bit to give it that tribal look right there. And I'll do the same thing on both sides. So for the nose, I'm just going to flick up a small line in the center and then flick up 2 curved lines on either side and fill in the underside of the nose. And you can see in just a second, in my attempt to kind of even it out and make it more symmetrical, I brought the black up a little bit too high and it made it look more like a fox or a dog nose, so that's not going to work. So I'll show you what I'll do. I'm just going to spritz the end of my sponge, a clean sponge, and just swipe down and wipe it right off. And then I'll fill it back in with a little more of that neon yellow. And while the neon yellow is drying, I'm just going to go in with a number 1 brush and some more of that Crivolin Black, and I'll pull a straight line down the center of my forehead, and I'm going to use that in order to build my design. I'm going to attempt to make the lines on each side somewhat symmetrical, so I'm just making them pretty thin to start out with, and then I'll come back in and start filling them in a little bit more with more of the black. So to make this more of a tribal look, I'm just going to curve it in and then fill it in to make lots of U shapes and connecting lines. So I'm going to keep going in. Now I've switched to a number 1 liner brush just for a smaller detail brush. And I'm going to create some little U shapes and fill them in there and just connect those lines together. And I'll swoop up 2 more curved lines coming in. And then from the outer corner of the eye, I'm going to start doing some tribals sweeping up over the white section. So it's just a curved line coming in with a C shape on the end and then a U shape connected to that. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. You can see I'm switching from one side to the other on each section of these elements so that I can sort of get them symmetrical instead of doing all of one side and then all of the other. That seems to help me when I'm doing tribal designs like this. So now that my nose is dry, I'm going to go back in with that number 1 liner brush and just flick up the lines, and I'm going to keep it low. And then I'll split the lip, so just come straight down from the center of the bottom of the nose. And then I'll pull up some curved lines around the edges, and then I'll outline the muzzle area, so between the white and the blue. So since I had so much other line work, I'm just going to keep the edges of this design very simple. So it's just a line going up the side of the cheekbones, and then a thinner line, and then I connected the two with two small U shapes to give it that travel feel. And I felt like I had a little bit of a blank area up there near the top, so I'm just curving a line in and making it sharp on both ends, and then I'll come in and make a U shape and then fill it in just the same way I did on the other lines in the design. So next, for some dots in the design, I'm using a number 5 round brush so I can get some really nice dots, and just anywhere I feel like there's an empty spot or that could use a little bit of accenting, I'm going to go in and make a series of dots. I try to do my dots in odd numbers, so 3s or 5s or 7s. So there's 3 coming up there, and then a few more coming down there. And next, I felt like those lines up at the top needed a little bit more connecting as well, so I'm just going in and adding some more C shapes and filling them in. Next, for the lips, I'm going to use Crivolin's Marble Blue. This is a gorgeous metallic color, and then I'll fill it in with a little bit of Afterglow Cosmetic Glitter and Iridescent Blue Fairy Wing. So using the number 1 liner brush, I'm just going to come in and paint in the muzzle stripes. So I'm just pulling the brush in and making thin little lines facing in toward that center line in the lip. And next, I'm going to use some of the neon yellow, again on a number 5 round brush, to go in and make a few accent dots on top of the black line work. And then I'll give myself some tiger hair, and that's it. That's the finished look. I hope you guys like this. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to comment below and subscribe.